Right. Hello, everyone. Patricia Ivan here again of HarvestSprings Ministries International. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Mental Health Week, and we are here again talking about mental health. In one of my sessions with Annie, she made a statement which I'm going to hold on to because I've got her on again, that openness is the enemy of mental health, that it's really important that we have these conversations. And I know it within the faith communities that these type of conversations, we don't often have enough of them. And if we don't name what they are, we can't use every available tools and strategies to help us. So I'm really glad that I've got Annie here today talking about something slightly different to perhaps what everybody might be familiar with and used to. But before I bring her on to share about that, I'm going to just give you a brief bio of Annie, so you know who Annie is if you've not watched any of our other videos. So Annie, I'm a trained family therapist. Annie trained me. She was very much involved in my training and also clinically supervises me at this present time. Annie has a vast experience in the field of psychotherapy, is very well respected by many, many colleagues as a consultant systemic psychotherapist herself. She's always had that clinician hat on, but also a manager true to the core, being a director of a psychotherapy training program, one of which I went through, and also she headed one of Relate's 5 regions across the UK, leading that service as well as being the head of one of the National Health Service services providing psychotherapy in London. So Annie, it's so great to have you. And today we are going to be focusing more on another hat that she wears as a psychosexual therapist. So, so I'm hoping she'll tell us a little bit about what that means, what that is for a lot of people who don't know what that is. But also even more so right now in our world, COVID-19 is locked all of us in and couples are locked in, and that even becomes a bigger conversation. You know, I've seen on different social media platforms where couples are running away from one another because they're bored to themselves because they're locked inside the same house. So there's no escaping to work. So Annie, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for honoring that invitation to come on. And yes, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Patricia. And I know I have said this before, but I think this is such a worthwhile project that you're involved in. And I was very honored to be asked to have some conversations with you. And I guess you wanted me to talk a little bit about sort of psychosexual work. And I guess just to say what that is, essentially it's working therapeutically with people who are experiencing some difficulties in their sexual relationships. And I guess there is often a link, not surprisingly, with the sort of the mind, the body and emotion. And that if people are experiencing sexual issues, that can affect their relationships, and people who are experiencing difficulties in their relationship, that can affect their sort of physical intimacy. So I guess that's what it is in a nutshell. And I think, you know, you and I were talking, and the idea of, as you say, people are having to spend much more time with one another than they might normally do. There isn't work, there isn't school, so people are really together for longer periods of time. And I guess there is something acknowledging that might be stressful for many of us. And, you know, there are very few times in our life where we're expected to be in the same physical environment with another person for many, many weeks. That there is generally something, a bit of toing and froing that just creates sort of other people to have conversations with, really. But I guess what I really also wanted to make a link about is, because it is Mental Health Week, and I think over the time of sort of working with people with sexual issues, what I have noticed, and particularly in the field of mental health, is that, again, as you said, that somehow silence is something which can be obviously something that we might all escape to, really. And I think it's often because of shame or embarrassment. But there are many people that I've worked with who depression particularly can really impact on people's sex drive, their libido, and that can be, their partner can construe that as a message either about the relationship or how their partner is feeling about them. And so there is something very important about trying to keep talking to each other about what's happening in, or how you're experiencing your couple relationship, so that these distances that get created by depression or anxiety don't increase, because that in itself, there's quite a vicious circle. If you become more distant, then the idea of having a physical relationship with your partner somehow decreases. So it's a sort of a complex dance, really. But I'm also, I know that that's not easy in you know, in many cultures, the sort of families we've grown up in, certainly in my family growing up in the UK in the sort of 50s and 60s, talking about sex wouldn't be something that people did. And I think there are many families where it's thought of as a sort of a taboo topic. And I suppose there's just something about how we can talk in a little bit more open way. And I think, of course, what's important is that you choose who you talk to. And I guess the person you try and talk to, first of all, is your partner, who will also have been noticing something. But sometimes if that's too difficult, to think about, is there a close friend, or would you be able to talk to your GP or somebody, so that you are not just left with this feeling about yourself that can grow and grow, really, and is so connected with, I think, shame and the silencing of issues, really. And I mean, perhaps it's a really obvious thing, but there, you know, there are many couples that I worked with over the years where they had some very difficult, perhaps, sexual relationships or sexual experiences in their own partnership early on in their marriage, which have never quite been resolved, and they were never spoken about. And when people were in their sort of 30s, they would maybe seek help because they wanted a child. And some people had never consummated their relationship because things had been very difficult early on. So all I'm saying is that there is such unnecessary suffering, I think, that can get caused by lack of communication. I don't know if there was anything you were thinking about there, Patricia, or wanted to ask or whatever, really.
Now, I was thinking about what you've just been saying about lack of communication, and that being a real tool that, when absent, when there is a lack of communication, it can break everything down. Because of course, it is generally, you know, accepted that we're all different. You know, people are different, and our expectations, even when it comes to our sexual life and the area of physical intimacy in marriages and relationships, is something to be spoken about. And I just wondered whether there are languages where it has always been a taboo to speak about it. How do you start such conversations? You know, what are they helpful tools of where to begin?
Okay. Well, I mean, there are some ways of certainly in some churches I know who do marriage preparation courses, might include the idea of sort of as you grew up, what could be spoken about and what couldn't be spoken about. So you start in sort of quite a gentle way, really, because, you know, this is not about disrespecting sort of societal ideas or ideas in certain communities, but just finding a way to just start talking with each other about you know, what was permissible to talk about. Could you talk about issues like menstruation, for example? And if so, who could you talk to about that? So on a sort of a step-by-step, really, basis. So if you're talking about in your families, what things were permitted to be spoken about, or could you talk to women in your family about certain things? And if you had a difficulty, who would you have spoken to? So how do we ever learn to talk about anything? And I think what's really important is that sexual relationships somehow don't get split off from the rest of human communication. And that it's not something which is sort of not valued as part of the human condition and as part of communication. And of course, none of us would be here if our parents hadn't had some physical intimacy. So it's sort of a universal. It's universal, but it's sort of, what is it that stops us talking? But not, I would hate people to think that this has to be an embarrassing conversation and that people should be talking about things they don't feel comfortable with, because that really doesn't help. But, you know, simple things about how you start talking, and this might seem a really simple thing, but maybe every day that there is a part of your day when you and your partner might just sit down and say, how's your day going? And that's how it starts, I think, really. So that you get used to just talking about the simple things of life, really. Not that everybody's day is simple, but that you get used to having a communication about good things and difficult things. And that's what you build on. I don't know if that's useful, do you think? Or
yeah, I believe so. It's always good to start from something that is familiar, something that you can do better than perhaps other things, and build up from there. And I really like the idea of, you know, touching base with the other person. And because then as you begin to ask that, I guess you begin to explore feelings around certain things and ideas around, you know, the relationship. I also really like what you were saying about taking a time out of our day to do so, because I think our days can get so busy that sometimes we often forget to, you know, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or, you know, however long we might need to actually stop and check in with the person we are in a relationship with and see how they're feeling and, you know, how they're doing. And you know, I think about ones where, you know, people who have grown up with their voices not being heard, and, you know, us being intentional about creating that space for their voice to be heard. I think it might not happen overnight. It might be you ask a question and you don't get much out of it, but it's really helpful to continue to engage in that silent moment until one day the silence does break. So yeah, definitely, I am reminded that that is really useful conversations to have. Are there places you could signpost people to where they feel they need more than the two of them?
Sure. I mean, I think Relate is still a very good organisation in terms of offering a psychosexual therapy service, and all the people there will be trained as counsellors, as couple counsellors, but will also have done an additional training, which is 4 years as a psychosexual therapist. So, and I think that's important, that you feel there's a confidence that you might have in who you choose to talk to will actually be able to listen. So I really sort of think it's a very valuable service, actually. And also, of course, another place to start, if you feel comfortable, is your GP, but not everybody always feels comfortable about that. But I think it's important to bear in mind that your GP has had the sort of training that will allow them to understand how the body functions, of course, and that can also be an important place to start.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And another place to, that, again, if you feel comfortable with it and you're part of a faith community, are your faith leaders. Many more people are becoming very aware of the need to be a bit more skilled in the area of mental health and how we address this conversation. So absolutely, do reach out. I think reaching out is always yes, we need to know where we reach out and that it's safe to do so. And for faith leaders, these are really highly confidential areas. Not that any of pastoral work isn't confidential anyway, but it's really making people creating that secure base, that secure space for them to be able to have these conversations without feeling blamed, named, or shamed.
So, yeah. And maybe what we've sort of, through our conversations, really, I think there has been a theme which you did really pick up on, that silence is can actually help difficulties to grow, whereas conversation can actually stop difficulties growing out of hand. And the courage that takes, that's not always easy. You know, it's not always easy, but.
Well, I don't think it's been easy having these conversations as well, at least putting them together, but I'm really grateful that we have done so, and I look forward to us doing many more of it. I really think that the world out there does need these nudges to kind of kickstart their journey into thinking about their mental well-being and what they can do to look after it. So we don't want it to end just because it's the end of Mental Health Week. No, we want it to continue. So yeah, thank you so much, Annie Turner, for coming on and sharing these ideas with us. Really, really grateful, and I appreciate the skills and the knowledge and the experience.
Thank you. And we have to say to people, keep safe, really, I think, at this time.
Absolutely. Whatever you do, keep safe.
Keep safe.
Thank you, Annie. Good to have you on, and I look forward to further conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.